let me take you behind the production of a score that I recently did for a stop-motion animated film. As I understand, this was put together as part of a school project. We can see Lego brick pieces have been used, and we'll also learn shortly that this sets in the Star Wars universe. I was very much intrigued when I was asked to score this because Star Wars, musically speaking, also means John Williams. And John Williams is one of the great composers of our time. He is about 93 years old. He's a living legend. And besides Star Wars, he's been responsible for so many other iconic soundtracks, just to name a few. Harry Potter, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, Home Alone, many, many more. So I knew when I wanted to do this right, it had to be influenced by John Williams, the style of John Williams, partly. And it also had to be a big orchestral score. So rolling out everything that we have from an orchestral point of view. Let me continue by playing this entire clip for you. It's about 2 minutes in duration. And then we'll go over some basic parameters. We'll dive into the orchestration part, what kind of libraries were used, how they were set up, and eventually a bit, an excursion to the mixing and finally mastering stage of this score. I titled it Sky Village Rising, and without further ado, here it is. That was Sky Village Rising, an orchestral score for this stop-motion animated film. Let's dive into the production. I'll make this window a bit smaller, but I will keep it in focus, so when we move around the playhead, we will be able to observe the changes here where we are with regards to the position and the time in the movie. Let's take a look at some parameters. We have a 4/4 beat here. We are in the key of E minor. We start at 120 BPM initially. Let me scroll the way back with regards to the tempo, and we have a bit of a tempo automation going on here. We'll later take it up to 142. It's a bit of a drastic bump here, but those parts fade into each other, so this is not noticeable to the user. And I definitely wanted to capture the speed and the dynamic also from a scoring perspective. Later on, there's even further tempo automation. We can see the staircase pattern here, where we eventually kick it up all the way to 167. This was important for me because I wanted to catch this final moment here, if you watch the video, where they eventually all are waiting on the suspension bridge for the final shot, and this was very much important to hit with an orchestral hit for a grand finale, so to speak. Okay, we have a big orchestra. As I said, we start with a bit of a, let me get this out of the way here. We start with a bit of a vocal setup here, but that only happens towards the end when everything is a lot more dramatic, and we will see that in a moment. So we have some choirs going on here. Then we have a huge string section. divided into full range string patches. We have violins, first, second violins. We have violas, different articulations such as staccato, pizzicato. There's also a universal patch because, by the way, I'm using for the most part the VSL, so the Vienna Symphonica Library for that one. And they have this universal articulation patch. And what does it mean? That the velocity of a MIDI note defines what kind of articulation it is. So it can be a long note, it can be a staccato note, depending on the velocity of the MIDI note. This allows me to just score different articulations in one track and is very handy for that matter. Right, then we have a cello section. There we also have cellos from the Vienna Symphonica Library, and one patch that I decided because I wanted to support this a bit more towards the end from the East-West sound library that I also have. Basses, we have a few going on. We have pizzicato basses, and we also have a double basses here. The pizzicato, we will see that in a moment. They are also used for percussive elements throughout the track, and the double basses further layer the low end of the piece. Percussion is also something that is quite important. I divided it into tuned and untuned percussion. What is that? You know, in an orchestra, you have percussion that also is tuned with regards to the note it produces when you hit it, and then there's untuned percussion, such as a snare drum or a bass drum that is untuned and is independent from what, you know, chord you play, and it will always work in that regard. Woodwinds, also an important section. Decided to go for piccolo flute, regular flute, clarinets, bass clarinets, oboe, and English horn, and a bassoon, just to fill up the register with regards to where these instruments operate in the frequency spectrum. Eventually, some brass. Brass is important, especially towards the end when we get very heroic. We need some heavy brass to support us there. To further illustrate that, I can show an orchestral layout. This would be the Carnegie Hall layout. There are many different ones, but this is just for demonstration purpose, where, for example, we have the conductor here, and you have to imagine the conductor. That would be me as the person who scores it, who directs the articulations, but I'm also the person who's responsible for each and every instrument in the orchestra when I perform the piece or the individual tracks and layer them together. So we have a string section there, is more to the left with regards to the violins, first, second violins. The violas are to the right, then joined by the cellos, and eventually basses all the way to the right. They are further accompanied by the brass section that also starts from low to high here, and we have the tubas, the trombones, trumpets, and so on. I'm not using a harp for this one, but I'm using a celeste that would possibly be in the same spot here or in a similar spot. Up here we have the tuned and the untuned percussion. It's called here pitched and unpitched, but it's essentially the same with the timpani and the bass drum and snare drum on the left, more on the left as compared to the tuned percussion. Now this is a demo setup. We forgot about the woodwinds. They would be like in front of the conductor here, spreading out slightly to the left and to the right. Okay. Bring back this window, we can take a look at a few interesting parts here. As you could observe, the score is starting pretty slow. So if we go back all the way, we can see there's not much going on with regards to strings. We are playing just a single note here. This is an E because all of the intro is in E minor. This is an E, and then it is further layered after one bar with a B and another E, but further down. So this is kind of a chord inversion here. And just to support it a bit more on the low end as initially, where we just have this like very long bowed note. If I quickly soloed it out, and you will see me doing that quite frequently, if I click this S button here, it means solo only this track plays. If I press this M button, that means mute only. This track will not be, so this track will not be played. All the other tracks will be played just for reference. Let's quickly listen to it. Yeah, so we could hear a long bowed note, then soon after one bar, joined by two other notes in this celestial strings section here, also by VSL, Vienna Symphonica Library. Very soon also already in the first bar, we start with a woodwinds motive. If I just play those two together, you will be able to hear that again. Yeah, just to set the tone, the mood, the atmosphere. Very slow. What's happening in the video is like this character is exploring the construction site, so we want to keep a bit of this mystical approach here, not unleash the full force of the orchestra right away. It should support the scene, so just a tiny bit of woodwinds, and also we have a bit of tuned percussion here, the timpani. If I just play it again, but this time just the timpani and maybe the strings, so they're layered together a bit nicer here, then we can hear the hit on this tuned drum. Very soft, very subtle. This is further used for a bit of a scoring magic later on. If we take a look at this section here, and if we watch what the character is doing, then we will notice that as he knocks, he has this kind of tool here, and as soon as he knocks against this building or this like pillar, then we will see that this is being supported by the timpani here. So let me just play that in solo and watch what the character is doing. Yeah, just a bit of ear candy piece here and there to support with the score actually what's happening on the screen, which is one of the main tasks that you want to achieve when you score something. This then further develops a bit as the scene goes on, and we also bring in a bit of a violoncello, and this is played in a tremolo kind of articulation. I will quickly solo that one out so you know what I mean. Play it. And it also increases in the dynamics here, as you can see from the MIDI notation. Yeah, just to add a bit more drama to this and a bit more, maybe, yeah, a bit more emphasis on what is about to happen. I mentioned one thing that is quite important, and that is dynamics, and dynamics are achieved using the mod wheel. If I just bring this one up here and I show you the automation, then you can see there is quite a lot going on here. We have this modulation here, and this can be achieved either manually. You could draw this like with the mouse and adjust it, but I prefer to do it with the MIDI keyboard that has a modulation wheel built in, because you can really do this with a lot of feel and make this as believable as possible by emulating what a real player on that instrument would do. So as the modulation is kicking up this value and I'm rolling it further up, also the dynamics and the sound with regards to how strong it is and how loud it is will be affected. We can quickly continue to listen to that, watch the modulation curve, and observe what's happening. You can see it's slowly crawling up there, and this is something that I did for every instrument in this piece, because it's one of the key things that you have to keep in mind when you lay down an orchestral piece from a MIDI perspective. Then you need, for these instruments, for strings, doesn't matter, almost any instrument, you need this modulation parameter dialed in, because this is what real players would also do. They play more aggressive, they play more laid back, they play softer, whatever. So different articulations, and the dynamics are very important to make this believable. So you'll see this many times, or you will hear this many times. There's also, as I just saw, let me hide this one, a bit of tempo automation, a bit of volume automation going on, where I just want to make things a bit louder or softer based on the part, or on the where we are actually in the track. Not too interesting, but of course very much important for the overall dynamics to support that from a volume perspective. Okay, so as this continues and these characters, they are dragging in this kind of magazine, it looks like a catalog. I presume it is the actual manual of this Lego piece that you can buy in a store. Then I'm making it a bit more interesting by supporting this with a string patch. And this patch, if I just quickly find it, it should be in the, here it is, in the Symphonic Elements by UJam. So this is a very special Hans Zimmer, another great movie composer, Hans Zimmer collection, and it is kind of one-stop shop here for what I wanted to achieve. It has some very nice strings there, lows and highs, dynamically played, and also a bit of percussion played by strings. I will quickly solo that out, and then you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so it has a bit of this clock thing impression that makes it a bit more dynamic and dramatic over time, as I figured. So time is running, let's get this thing builded, and to further emphasize this, I layered it with this tremolo. So if we play both together, we will hear this patch and also the tremolo effect here that is increasing over time, as we've just seen by taking a look at the modulation curve. Yeah, so increasing the drama here before we eventually dive into the core of the piece. Now these patches, just quickly talking about them, they're quite handy. You immediately have a great sound and can achieve that. Obviously it comes with limitations, so if I wanted to score this for a live orchestra performance that would be done later, this would be maybe problematic, because I would have to transcribe it to the individual sections that will play this. But this is not meant to be played by a live orchestra, at least not that I know of right now. So this can be a very handy and nice helping shortcut there to achieve a great sound without further layering it on the individual instruments. Okay, as we then really start building this, you can see there are a few markers up there, and those markers are cue elements or hit points that I wanted to hit with the music. We also reached a point in the score where we bump up the tempo. And I've mentioned this before, that this is a quite drastic move here, but if we listen to the transition, we'll be able to to actually tell that it works quite well. Let's see. Yeah, I had just this section soloed now so you couldn't hear it, but it nicely transitions into the other part. Just quickly play one bar and then one bar of the other part. Just go. So it fades out, there's one soft hit on the timpani, and then we actually begin with the core of the theme. There's a bit of an intro here, played on the violins, actually on the full range staccato patch first, then taken over by the first violins, joined by the second violins as a bit of a rhythmic support, and further also from a rhythm perspective from the violas, but also to support the melody by the violas. And this then eventually goes into the theme that we've heard, and the theme is played twice. First it's being played by the violins, and later on we hear it again, and then it is being played by the brass section to make it even more heroic. That is something that is quite exclusive to brass, that they can sound very heavy and very in your face and up front, and that's why I wanted to use them to further emphasize the drama that is going on here. All right, so let's quickly listen to that as this is playing, and then maybe also let's take a quick look at the bass section just to see what's going on there from a rhythmic perspective. I will just play it right now and then pass this one in and out so we can hear what's going on in the basses. Yeah, we can hear there is already a very tight rhythm going on. So I've layered 3 different kinds of strings here. As I already mentioned here, this is pizzicato, and this is just a regular articulation. If we just solo this one out, and we can hear it. Yeah, and here with this one, we really have this percussive element. If we listen to it, we can hear it. Yeah. If we take a look at the MIDI notation here, we can see they're quite, from a velocity point of view, they're quite high, and there is this certain threshold. If you are above a certain velocity, then you will hear this kind of slappy attack, and if not, then it's being played more in a regular way, and by alternating between these two articulations, you can create a very interesting rhythm. And so this supports us on the low end for the mids, of course, other strings that are being played, some violas, they are doing also a bit of a rhythmic part here. If I just solo out these, then we can hear that here as well. Joined by the other ones. Yeah, so trying to fill up the soundscape that we have, the frequency spectrum, with different instruments, and they all have their strength in the certain registries where they are most comfortable with regards to the sound that they can produce. Okay, further going along, we have this main theme as we talked about, and then we dial it back a notch from the overall excitement. This is also something I think is very important for an orchestra score. It has to flow. It's not always like full pedal to the metal, let's go. This has to be something, you know, it picks up speed and or it picks up dynamics. Also, if it remains, it doesn't change the tempo. But it just depends on what kind of instruments that you use and how you layer them together, of what the listener then will actually perceive as a from a dynamics point of view, of how aggressive or how laid back that it is. And we have a woodwind section here going on. They usually play in unison. That means they play the same notes all the time. But these, of course, when I recorded them, they are sometimes copied. But I apply the humanization algorithm, which is very important, because if you have two players of any kind, and they can be the most professional ones, they will never always play in a live scenario the exact same notes at the exact same time with the exact same velocity. It's just not possible, humanly possible. And we also want to have this human factor. So if we're playing in a virtual orchestra and we're working with a virtual orchestra, then all of these human factors have to be considered for it to make it, in order to make it believable that this is a live performance, or like an actual performance is what we want to achieve by using one of these libraries. So quickly soloing out the woodwinds so we can hear what they are doing when they're playing this theme. I'll just solo out this section and see what they are doing. Yeah, we can hear the piccolos, they are in the upper register, and then we further go down with regards to where the individual instruments have their strengths. We have a few flutes, so two flutes actually going on that are playing here. I'm just soloing out this one here. Let's join it with the other one. Yeah, so it gets a bit more full, and maybe also joining with one of the piccolo flutes, we can hear that it adds more weight to the entire piece. So this actually supports the main theme that is prominently interpreted by the string section, the violins, for example. And then later, as I said, we take it back a notch, and that is happening here, where we actually then play this motive here on the woodwinds, and just have a few strings really laid back. Let's explore that a bit more in detail. Sorry, here. So you can hear there is a motive being played on the woodwinds, but you can also hear that there is a bit of a string element going on in the background. Maybe listen to it again, because those are quite important, like nice important elements to the piece. Yeah, you can hear. So this is played, let's play it more laid back. So, as I said, I think this is quite important when scoring, that you play with these elements, that you make things more dynamic, more upfront, but you also dial them back dynamically. So it's like something that is always in motion, that is flowing around, and you want to support that with your score and with the instruments that are playing together. Eventually, we end up at this final section, and that's where it becomes very heroic, and there I would really like to focus on the brass. We hear the main theme again, so if we just solo out this one, we'll focus on this region, then we will hear that this main theme that we've heard before, played by the strings, is now played by the brass section, and if we solo it out, it sounds like that. Let me actually move that up, the playhead a bit more closer to the beginning here, and let's go. So that's the heroic moment, and to further emphasize it, I layered it with another brass patch, but this one is from the Berlin Orchestra. Let's see if we can hear a difference if we could just kind of play this and then use the other solo button to join and layer them together. Just gets ever so slightly a bit more full to support the other section, or they're supporting each other in that regard. We further have a bit of a rhythmic part going on also on the brass, so let's just solo that one out and see what it's doing. So rather short notes, stabs, so to speak. And if we put them together, then they nicely accompany each other and nicely make this picture work. And another symphonic elements, brass element, also from the Hans Zimmer collection, is this one. I will quickly solo it out here, and we can hear what it's doing. So very heavy. It's supporting us there, and I figured I wanted to have a bit more, full background texture, and that's where it came in quite handy. Also layered further with some woodwinds. We just join them together here. So they also play the theme. It's just an all-in, all hands on deck kind of situation where we get very heroic here. And we also have a snare drum that is playing here. It's playing this rhythm, that we have rolls, and then we have faster kind of 16th notes that are played. We can just listen to it in solo and we hear it. Yeah, just to support the rhythm and make this one in a more driving kind of style. And we also have then the choir that comes in towards a bit later in the piece, and I thought it needed this for a bit of extra drama. I will solo out the vocals here. We are using two different patches here. One is by East West Sounds, this is from using the Opus player, and the other one is from the Vienna Symphonic Library. I think it's the Angelic Choir. Let's just play the East West first. Really dramatic ahs, and also have a look at the other one. Yeah, so we are using two different patches here, and the one from the Opus library from East West Sounds, they're more in the low registry. If we take a look at the MIDI notation here, and we can see they are going all the way down here. There's some basses going on, and we have tenors, sopranos, alts, and then sopranos. And the other one is focusing more on the higher part. So I wanted to, join them together in a way that they shine in different registries and allow me to add more weight and more drama to the piece. Obviously, they're not the main part, so they're not really up front, but just dialed in a way that they're supportive enough and add to the overall excitement as we reach the finishing line of the score. Let's just listen to that one over with all the instrumentation in place. You might have been the final hit, or the orchestral hit, lining up with this still shot of everybody on the suspension bridge for the grand finale. You have heard some additional excitement here on the strings. This is actually something that I wanted to have very upfront here. We can see some quite fast runs up and down on the various string sections. So first violins, second violins, also joined by the violas. They are playing these fast runs, and also these fast runs are played in unison and supported by the woodwinds. And I thought this was quite important for, on the one hand you have the choir supporting you more in the dramatic kind of way, and the runs, they really drive it forward and they bring it home. If we quickly solo out the violins here, bring it together so we can hear what they're doing. Bring in the second ones. Further staccato. They are also treated with a humanization algorithm, just so they are not 100% equally played as you would have it in a live orchestra. We further have some steps, some hits also down here towards the end on the individual brass sections, and also supported by what is being played on the strings here. For example, if we solo that one out, then we can hear that this is really supported here with regards to what is happening towards the final moments of this piece. Let me just solo that one out. Yeah, and this is done on several layers to make it more exciting. Yeah, so how do you start writing something like that? Because it's already rather complex at this point. Can't really truly answer that. Usually I start on the piano, try to dial in some rhythm, play some motives, and then eventually I end up with a certain key that I'm playing in. And then you just lay down a few tracks on the MIDI keyboard with regards to what you hear at that moment. And then it's a work in progress, continuing to iterate of what you have, how you might want to change it, evolve it, refine it. It's an ongoing process. The composition of this piece, it took a couple days. The writing process overall took a couple days, and then the production also maybe 2 or 3 days altogether combined. So about like 6-7 days, I suppose, but not full days. Always just as a bit of a spare time activity here. Okay, so what are we still looking for here to do? Right, we want to take a look at the mixing and a bit at the mastering. Not spending too much time, because the Vienna Sinfonica library, it sounds really great out of the box. That means not much treatment is needed. Of course, you need EQ, you need compression to clean up the frequency spectrum, to, have things isolated, not blending into each other, having frequency masking. So all of those things, of course, apply for the production, but they sound really great out of the box. They are, well played, well recorded samples. There is really nothing wrong with them. I did a bit of saturation here and there. Used, for example, for the cello, I used the Fresh Air. This is a free plugin that adds some nice saturation, a bit compression. I did a bit of directional mixing to isolate frequencies that are above a certain crossover or below a certain crossover, 150 hertz. This is usually more important for rock, pop genres. Electronic music, I still thought I want to have the basses not to bleed too much above their frequency range, so I tried this one. And what else? There are a lot of like Pro Q4 instances going on, just very subtle moves. Cutting here, for example, this is a woodwind section. I didn't want the woodwinds to go below this frequency. Also, additionally, or as an alternative, there could have been like a low shelf. I decided for a cut here, but sometimes I'm using also a low shelf, not to just really drastically cut the lows, but maybe dial them back a notch. A bit of like shine above 10K here for the air frequencies. and a bit of a boost here around 2.4K. Just for example, when I dialed it in, you do never do these kind of EQ moves in solo. You always do it in the context of the piece, because you want to hear how is the volume affected in the certain frequency range at the band that you're treating. So that has to be done in the context of the piece. Also Saturn 2, another saturation plugin that I like. For this one, for the brass, I chose a band up here between 2 and 5K and added a bit of a warm drive to it. So things like that happen throughout the track. Lots of EQ, a bit of compression here and there, just to tame it and smoothen out the track. Eventually everything ends up in the mix bus. Further separation happens between melodic and percussive instruments, but there's no additional treatment at this point. So we end up at the mix bus, and also not a lot happening. I have an instance of Ozone 12 vintage tape just to warm it up a bit, very dialed back, very subtle, a bit harmonics, low emphasis, high emphasis, almost the same, just to warm it up a bit. And my go-to Poltec EQ, also very moderately dialed in, boosting a bit of 60 Hertz, slightly above 1 dB, a bit of attenuation, and the same for 4K for a bit more clarity in the highs. All right, now getting to the mastering stage, going about this, we start off with my go-to compressor. This is an SSL compressor. I will quickly play a section and we will see that the overall gain reduction that has been dialed in here, it's dialed or it's configured as a glue compressor. So you would have a slow attack, auto release here, moderate 2-to-1 compression, analog style, because just I love it. And when we play, we'll see that this meter here is probably maxing out at about 2 to 3 decibels. Let's hear it. But we need to remove the saw here. Yeah, bit of additional glue. Then we go into an instance of Pro MB, just a bit of tiny compression adjustments for the different bands. So it shows you low, mids, and highs. Nothing too fancy, because as I said, these instruments sound great as they do, just for the additional glue after the compressor that we used to start off the chain. A bit of a God particle to add some width. It's debatable whether that is necessary, just like the plugin. Also, of course, dialed back a bit because it quite significantly increases the volume, and I'm not using the limiting option of this plugin, which it also has. Going into Ozone 12, I chose just bits and pieces and flavors. And if you've watched other videos where I do some mastering, then this is usually, I'm never doing heavy lifting with one plugin, try to avoid it. I try to make several plugins work together. Each and every plugin add their individual flavor. There's a bit of an impact going on here. An imager just to see if we have phasing issues, which we usually don't have with software instruments there. And just a 1 dB side recovery. Clarity, something I find quite important. Also dialed back a bit with regards to the initial setting, just to have it more clear here. Stabilizer with an orchestral shape, also dialed back a bit, just very subtle in that way. Dynamics IQ, some problematic frequencies that I thought needed a bit of attenuation there treated. Eventually going into a maximizer, which is a limiter, but only a very slight plus 3 dB, so there's no limiting actually going on here at this point, because orchestral scores are more laid back anyways and not that loud, not supposed to be mastered that loud at least. Not by default. We have a bit of a stereo independence between transients and sustain here, a bit of upward compression, a bit of soft clip. I never overdo it at this stage with regards to the limiting, because I always like to run it through a gold clipper. Now as an orchestral score, debatable, do you need a clipper? I think yes. I just wanted to knock off or cut off 2.2 decibels here. I dialed in a bit of gold, added a bit of alchemy, which are very specific settings to the gold clipper here, and then eventually going into the Pro L2, which is at my current production workflow my final limiter by FabFilter. Really enjoyed. Usually when I do rock pop genres or anything but orchestral music, this goes way more, but I figured I don't need that for this kind of genre. It's just a very moderate plus 2 decibels, of course, -1 output limiting here, so we are not clipping. Dialed in just as a default limiter with a bit of a look ahead, and attack release, attack fast release slow. And we can see usually your orchestral scores, you would really stay maybe within the -14 LUFS. There's different opinions on that, but I decided as loud is always better, you know. I decided to just kick it slightly above that. If we play that final section and watch the limiter, then we will be able to see where we're actually landing here with regards to the loudness, the lufs. So -11, maybe quickly, maybe dipping a bit further down to -10, but not below that. This is not, as I said, rock, pop, anything too aggressive here. Also with regards to the instrumentation that requires loud and punchy sound, I thought that was quite nice at this point. Okay, that brings us to the end of this behind the scenes look. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, just let me know, ask anytime, and I'll try to answer them. And hopefully you enjoyed the piece. It also streams on Spotify. It's called Sky Village Rising if you want to watch it without the footage. Thank you very much, and until next time.